A huge Camaro logo still hangs on the door of a Michigan factory. It's been there for a year and a half, but not a single Camaro is manufactured inside anymore. The workers who walk past that emblem every morning now drive Cadillac sedans, while the symbol of the car that made that plant famous continues to face the road as if nothing had happened. Chevrolet killed the Camaro in 2024 and told a simple story to explain it. Sales were falling, people wanted SUVs, and new regulations were coming. All of that was true, but not the whole truth, because the decision that ended one of America's most beloved coupes wasn't made with the Camaro in mind. Today we're going to tell you the 6 reasons that killed the Camaro in the order they actually happened. You'll recognize the first 2 right away. The third is so strange it's hard to believe it's legal to talk about it in a car video, and the last 2 have nothing to do with the Camaro itself, but with a factory in Michigan and a union contract that had already decided its fate before anyone at Chevrolet officially talked about killing the car.
Welcome to AutoLedger.
The Camaro had just come off a banner year of 91,314 units sold in 2012, its best year in decades, and a 2016 relaunch that critics hailed as the most sophisticated 6th generation in its history, with a ZL1 1LE version that even broke the Camaro's own lap record at the Nürburgring circuit in Germany. Yet, that 6th generation only sold 72,705 units in its first year, already falling below that 2012 peak. And therein lay the first reason why Chevrolet would ultimately kill the Camaro, also the most visible of all. Sales continued to decline year after year without exception, dropping from 67,140 units in 2017 to 50,963 in 2018, a decline that was already beginning to worry Chevrolet dealerships. A year later, in 2019, the figure fell again to 48,265, just as the pandemic hit. It decimated sales of almost every car in the world. The problem was what happened next. When the market recovered in 2021 and 2022, the Camaro lagged behind, with 21,093 units sold in the first year and 25,722 in the second, a far cry from the figures of a decade earlier. And in 2023, the last full year of production, the number fell again to 23,778. 10 years after its peak, the Camaro was selling a quarter of what it had sold at its best, and that was the reason any Detroit analyst would have pointed to without hesitation. No one sustains a model whose sales dropped to a quarter in a decade. However, within Chevrolet, there was already a second concern, just as real as the first. The second reason, which Chevrolet did acknowledge publicly, though never in full detail, was explained by Harlan Charles, Camaro product manager, in an interview with CNBC. People still liked cars like the Camaro and the Corvette, but SUV and crossover designs addressed many more needs simultaneously, and on top of that, emissions and fuel consumption regulations were becoming increasingly stringent each year. In other words, a buyer who in 2012 took home a Camaro because they wanted a good-looking and fast car, in 2020 took home an SUV because they needed space, height, and fuel economy that wouldn't break the bank at the gas pump every week. The Camaro was still popular, but what stopped making sense for a growing segment of the public was buying one. The third reason sounds like something out of a casual conversation, but it's fully documented in an official General Motors technical bulletin. Since January 2021, California and Washington banned the sale of the Camaro SS, ZL1, and 1LE due to the copper content in their brake pads. This law, passed a decade earlier to protect salmon, stems from the fact that brake dust accumulates in rainwater, reaches rivers, and this copper is toxic to fish. So Chevrolet had to redesign the braking system of its most powerful versions just to be able to continue selling them in those 2 states. For almost a year, if you lived in Los Angeles or Seattle and wanted a new Camaro ZL1, you had to buy it in another state and bring it back yourself. A curious, almost anecdotal chapter compared to the fourth reason, the one that truly began to explain why the Camaro was doomed. The fourth reason is one that almost no one mentioned at the time, and it is this. The 6th generation Camaro, the one that ceased production in 2023, never had a platform designed just for it. It shared the Alpha architecture with the Cadillac ATS, launched in 2013, and with the Cadillac CTS, launched a year later. When those 2 Cadillac sedans were replaced by the CT4 and CT5, the Camaro moved with them to the next version of that same platform. In practice, this meant that the cost of designing, updating, and maintaining that mechanical architecture was never paid by the Camaro alone, but rather shared among several models simultaneously. For a decade, the Camaro had been, in engineering terms, the relative living on loan at the Cadillac house. While Camaro sales were falling, those of those Cadillac sedans weren't doing so well either, and when the model that pays the most for a platform starts to fail, the one that lives on borrowed time on that same platform automatically becomes the most dispensable of all, even though nobody within Chevrolet would want to admit it out loud. And the fifth reason, the one that no one ever explained in a press release, begins in March 2023, when Scott Bell, Chevrolet's global vice president, announced that 2024 would be the last year for the Camaro, and said that the brand was not announcing an immediate successor, but that this was not the end of the car's story. And what Bell did not explain is that the decision had not come from an analysis focused on the Camaro, but from a much broader question about what to do with the Lansing Grand River factory in Michigan, where the Camaro and the Cadillac CT4 and CT5 sedans were assembled at the same time. 7 months after the last Camaro rolled off the assembly line in July 2024, the U.S. Department of Energy announced a $500 million investment to convert Lansing Grand River into an electric power plant. Then Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm traveled to Michigan to announce it in person, as part of a much larger federal package distributing $1.7 billion among 11 factories across the country. The plan promised to maintain at least 650 jobs and create 50 more, provided the factory completed the transition to electric vehicles. All indications are that this discussion between GM and the federal administration was already underway even before Chevrolet officially announced the end of the Camaro. The car didn't lose its place because it fell out of favor. It lost it because the entire factory already had another plan, and that plan didn't include a Camaro. And there's the sixth reason, the one that explains why all this happened exactly when it happened. 6 weeks before the layoffs, in November 2023, GM had reached a new national contract with the UAW union that included 25% wage increases spread over 4.5 years, new protections against plant closures, and a commitment to invest $1.25 billion in Lansing Grand River for future electric power production. So the bureaucratic and industrial machinery then moved in parallel. Chevrolet ended production of the 6th-generation Camaro in December 2023. With a limited edition called the Collector's Edition as its official farewell. And just a few weeks later, UAW Local 652 confirmed that 369 workers at Lansing Grand River and the nearby stamping plant would lose their jobs starting January 1, 2024. Lena Worth, vice president of the local union, explained it this way in a statement to the Michigan press. With the end of the Camaro, the factory lost between 300 and 350 employees who were placed on indefinite leave while awaiting possible relocation to another plant in the area, and Lansing Mayor Andy Shore declared himself deeply disappointed by the decision. The factory that had produced one of America's most beloved coupes found itself, overnight, manufacturing only luxury sedans for a dwindling handful of customers, though the Camaro logo, strangely, never disappeared from the doors. For several generations of fans, the Camaro was never just a catalog car. It was the yellow and black bumblebee that Michael Bay made the star of Transformers in 2007, the official car of the Indianapolis 500 several times between 2016 and 2023, and the model that propelled Chase Elliott to win the NASCAR Cup Series championship in 2020 and Kyle Larson to repeat the title a year later with Chevrolet. Today, more than a year and a half after the last Camaro rolled off the assembly line, the Lansing Grand River factory still stands, operating on a single shift, assembling the Cadillac CT4 and CT5, and the Camaro logo still hangs above the main gate, as reported in 2025 by Bridge, Michigan, as a reminder of what was once built there. NASCAR retired the Camaro name from its Cup Series cars starting in the 2025 season and renamed them simply ZL1, although the SS model continues to race in the Xfinity Series. The remaining owners care for their Camaros with the same dedication as always, taking them to meetups, showing them at trade shows, and talking about them as if they were something that hasn't quite disappeared. Every summer, these same owners still fill entire parking lots at gatherings dedicated solely to the Camaro, proof that an entire community doesn't die just because a factory changes its plans. Reports are circulating in the specialized press, without official confirmation from Chevrolet, that speak of a 7th Camaro for 2027, this time a gasoline-powered one, built again on a platform shared with a Buick sedan and the upcoming Cadillac CT5 at the same Michigan factory. If that happens, the Camaro will return for the exact same reason that killed it, a shared platform that this time might once again be enough to justify its existence. If you found this story interesting, subscribe to the channel, Because at AutoLedger, we tell the whole life story of cars that the world declared dead too soon.